to I wanted to make sure we put some context, because all of you are in different type of businesses. Some have social purpose or nonprofits. Some are traditional business for profits. So if we look at this graph from the European Venture and Philanthropic Association, they put a series of different types of companies that exist that are grouped by the primary driver for the existence of that business. We have been mostly of the traditional businesses, which are for profit, where the financial return and therefore the growth of the capital of the investors is the main force. And this has been the traditional way of looking at businesses and startups. So that's why we have traditional businesses here. And on the other side, we have the primary driver being the non-for-profit or non-profit organizations that really are doing something for the benefit of the world, or doing good, and not having the primary role of financial profit. So this is the typical charities that we've grown to know. Some are large organizations with donors, and they provide funds for different social purposes and so forth. But in between, there are organizations in which both financial returns and social purpose or social impact come to play in different degrees. The mix could be 50-50 or more towards one or the other. And therefore, the ones that have this social impact are called social purpose organizations. These are names that are important for us to use, because most of what this presentation is going to include uses these type of terms rather than the financial typical terms that are used in traditional businesses. So under the social purpose organizations, we have these revenue generating social enterprises in which, unlike the charities, which are not revenue generation, they do social good, but they have different structures according to how much the priority is to either do social impact and no financial returns, or more towards the financial returns. So you have terms like socially driven businesses, where the profit that these organizations create are normally used to go to people other than just the financial investors. So basically that's it. And in traditional businesses, you may have the mainstream market company, that are those companies that traditionally go to the stock market. Some others have historically dedicated a part of their profits to go directly into some sort of charities or doing good besides what they do in the company. And some have incorporated social impact aspects into their business, in which, although the primary return is the financial aspect of a traditional business, but they do more things meaningful, not just to do some window dressing, so to speak. No, they do something, but finance is first for the traditional businesses, impact only through grants, say the charities, and these are impact first for social investment, okay? So within this, we now go and ask you as a checking in, if I can change, there we go. Where are you located? In which of these would you say you fall into? And I'll go back, if I can, to, whoops. As you do this, I'll go back to that chart to give you, a better reference, whether you are entirely 1 or 10, or you are in between. So are we?
Hillary has a question.
Sure.
Go ahead, Hillary.
I'm just curious about potentially sustainable, more than 75% trading revenue.
Yes.
Can you explain that just a little bit more, please?
I have to say that I was hoping that that question would not be raised because I don't have a good answer for it. This comes from this European Venture and Philosophical Association. I did not have time enough to go to their website and try to find all of their definitions. The word trading is the confusing term, and it could refer to many different things. So if trading, for example, were to refer to make profit out of trading financial assets, for example, as a side thing in order to maintain, the money that they have in reserve, so to speak, and most of that go and the 25% is the social stuff. Well, that could be one definition. I don't think it is, because more than 75% means that they are closer to the charities. So most of those activities have to be where the money is going to the action impact for social improvements or social benefits. So at this stage, the only response I would say is, rather than focus on those definitions, consider that whatever type of organization is on that left block, the 75%, it's closer to a charity, and the other two are closer to the traditional businesses. That's as far as I can, get back to you without, saying something that could be incorrect.
I'll appreciate that. I was just curious because, of course, I am going to be, donating to various organizations that I believe bring peace to the world through music. So I consider myself still a social impact, and I'll be sharing out profits. So I think I'm more of a socially driven business. And so I would mark 5 on this or 10.
Let's do that for now. It's not so important that we pick one of these right now. As a matter of fact, before you launch your company, obviously you will have a better idea of where you fit. But at this stage, for what you were saying, I thought you were more of a charity, because if the role of your company is to give out funds to other organizations to promote certain things, like in this case, peace, it looks for just that statement that you're more of a charity. But that could be different. I mean, I do not know about what your overall business plan and objectives are. But so we can get into more about that later on in the presentation. So on the results of this, I have to say, I was expecting to see more or less number of 10s, because 10 basically is a mainstream market company, which is fine. I mean, I'm not saying that a company that it's primarily driven by finance, by a return to its investors, and perhaps even as a goal have an exit strategy of going public. That could be very well, the intent of the founders of the company. But as you're going to see in today's world, there are more of the company allocating to charities or directly embedding into their business plans and ways of organizing and conducting activities in which there are some corporate social responsibility metrics and aspects of the company. While in the old days, I mean, we are a 50-plus-year-old group here. So in the environments in which we grew up, that's the world we lived in. We mainly, when we talked about creation of a business or an organization that was doing something, it was basically for pure financial gain. So we'll go forward and see where things take us. So, oops, I stopped sharing by mistake. I apologize. There we go. So as we've all been working through all of these 6 modules before, and this one is a slightly different, because it is different. As I said, this module would not have existed when we grew up and we were trying to build a business or going to a business school or something like that. So this is a more, a newer, might be from the 1970s initially and beyond. And lately, in the last perhaps 20 years, a big new movement. And for example, what is a social entrepreneur? That's what we are actually discussing in this module. And why now? Because the world has changed. And today, especially the younger generations, find it very important to them to do good in a way, where just making money is not necessarily enough. So here we're going to use some wordings that have been developed more recently. And they come from the adaptation of many business practices and business management theories in for-profit businesses, but have been converted and adapted, and new concepts have also come out with a particular language. And for social responsibility, social entrepreneurship, these wordings that I put here are part of the lexicon. So hopefully we're going to cover things, these as we go along. See, there we go. So on the left, you see the module 7 and all the steps that some of you may have already gone through. Some of you are probably going to see them soon. What I did is I took them and put them into 3 groups. So there you can see, one is the group called systems, because we're going to talk about systems, what they are and why they are so important. We're going to talk obviously about impact, because here we are not just having the typical financial impact of making money and increasing the value of the company for our investors, but we have other things. And then on the blue column is basically subjects that are important to this world of social entrepreneurship. And that's systems and systemic change, sustainability development goals, and theory of change. So as we go along, you'll see some slides that are blue. That's basically more of the understanding of the context and the theories behind it. And the rest is going to be either on systems at the beginning and the impact side of your organization next. Okay, so we start with systems. This, I always like when I find a new term that I have no idea what it could be, or the use of that in a new context. I like to go and understand what that word, how it's being defined today. And the reason I like this one in particular is because if you focus on the examples and the number 1 where it says similar, and you see structure, organization, order, arrangement, complex, apparatus, you are basically describing a system and some of the critical aspects of what a system is. In this particular case, a set of things that work together as a mechanism, and it's an interconnected network. And the example they give is the state railroad system. Now, that definition is interesting because if you look at it and you remember our module 2, when we were saying, okay, we already know what problem we are resolving, who we are going to be solving the problem for. And then we started looking about our competitors or our differentiation, our attributes, all of those things. We also looked at the industry in which we were going to play the game. And we had discussions about it's not just a matter of playing the game. There are certain features and characteristics of our solution that need to be there because otherwise we cannot even compete, play the game. But we need those differentiating characteristics of our product or service that will allow us to compete and hopefully win. Well, here, when we look at systems, well, the state railroad system, although it's an industry, okay, the transportation through railroads, that can be considered as a thing, a system. So you play your game in that industry or beyond that industry in the transportation world, which is also a system. Now, the other definition here, which is also interesting, is a little bit softer in a way. Although you have, infrastructure things, you need schools, okay? But the public school system, and there's a public school system, that's a system, has a method, ways of teaching, the techniques of teaching, the processes that they use. They have procedures and rules and regulations and approaches and a full number of other characteristics. Well, that's also part of describing a system. So if we take this as a first grasp of what we are talking about when we say a system, we can now move forward to explore a little bit more within the social entrepreneurial world. These are the things that have been considered as a framework to deal or identify or try to describe a system. So in your case, just like you did in which industry am I playing the game, here you go beyond the industry. So for example, if you were you had a system to provide education, for example, to a certain target population that today is not being served, whether you do it for profit or a mix of social good, you can start analyzing that system in its broad context, okay? When I say broad context, I really mean broad context. So as an example, in order to reinforce that notion that it's not just the industry, but a much broader context, I'm going to use the biggest context that you can possibly imagine for a system. And I will say, let's look at the system called the universe. Okay? So the universe is within this confine. Okay? So it has resources, things that are required to start describing, the system. Well, one, obviously, if we go back without getting into philosophy or religion or anything else, if we go back to the so-called Big Bang, well, some resources existed or appeared in the Big Bang. What are those resources? Well, energy, absolutely. Or primarily, initially, by the way, energy. But then there was differentiation of that energy. Mass started to appear. Eventually, you had the particles, and you had rules. For example, laws of physics. Gravity was one, the transmission, the creation of light, photons, et cetera, et cetera. So now the universe started becoming more complex. It had its rules, the laws of physics. It had a relationship between different things. You had galaxies, you had suns, you had neutron stars, all of these things, and each one plays a role in the functioning of this system called the universe. And each one has relationships. One of the typical relationships is gravity. We go around the Earth, around in space, in a certain way because of gravity with other objects, even if they are distant ones. And the results of this is basically very simple. So we exist. That is as simple as it can get. Now, I don't want you, obviously, to try and put your business into the context of a system called the universe. But you have to kind of look at this, that let's assume, as we were saying, someone giving an education to try and improve the lives of a certain segment of the market. Although you are doing that, and you're playing in the industry called education in the United States, well, the education is a broad thing. It's not just the education we get at schools. It's schools, universities, research centers, education in companies, education at home, education on the street level. So it's how we human beings learn. And obviously, in this case, the results of that would be, we want perhaps everybody to learn to their maximum full potential. And within that system, there's a lot of agents and things that perhaps are impediments to maximizing for every single individual its ability to learn or reach its full potential. So that's how we have to think about what a system is. Now, when I said we had resources, we had roles and relationships, we had rules and obviously results, this is what you're going to see in the platform when you go to one of the steps called systems, your system. So the resources are the non-human elements that go into the system to keep it running. So it's basically the structure. You have to have some things, for example, university housing system, money, technology, management resources or consulting. There's all the things that are required to form a system so that it has some structure to work in. Now, as we had the planets and the neutron stars and so forth, we have different pieces of that system, and each one functions slightly different, does certain things. So that's where you will have the roles. Like, for example, in the healthcare, you have patients, you have doctors, nurses, insurance, etc. You have the relationships. All of these actors do not work in a vacuum. The doctor and the nurse and the patient interact in very unique ways. The insurance company certainly interacts in very unique ways, not only with a healthcare system, but with us, the patients. And that is a very painful relationship and interaction. So those are the ones that you also have to pay attention in. And the rules, just like in the universe, you have the rules called the laws of physics. Here, in an education system, certainly laws and regulations, and who are the governments that are at the national level, the local level, et cetera, as well as the values. And we will get into that a little bit later on, because that is the biggest of the issues many times. And the results out of all of these things that are happening in the system are results. They can be good, they can be bad. We can have different opinions about whether they are good or bad. Sometimes they are very difficult to measure, and that's, as we'll see at the end of the presentation, why measuring is important. And the examples that they give here is, for example, that national adoption system, safe homes for orphans, backlogs because of the bureaucracy. That would be a bad result. Homelessness, et cetera. So that's how we would be looking at the system. In the platform, you will recognize, for those that have gone through this already, you give a name to your system. So it's not necessarily in the name of your company or your industry. It's the name that you will give to this world, this mini universe, let's say, in which you not only are going to be operating in, but you're going to be part of the overall system's result. And one thing that it's useful to start identifying where you fit with your business and activity with a larger system is going back to module 1, I think it was, when we did the white tree. And this is to try and understand where the problems that you are solving for a certain target market, why is it that they have that problem, or is it a more fundamental problem, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where you will be able to enter things that you had similar to that white tree.
Gustavo, sorry to interrupt you. Do you mind? We can't see your slides that big. Could you stop sharing and try again so it's full screen? We can see like presenter view, I believe, so we can see it just smaller. But maybe if you stop sharing.
I stopped sharing.
Yeah, and try it again.
Let me exit first my presentation thing so that I will share the screen now. Hold on. And thank you for letting me know that that was happening. I had no idea. So let me see. I'm going to share. Now, you see the Zoom screen, I guess.
Yes.
So let me
go back to the presentation.
Now you see the presentation, and now I'm going to put it into presentation form. Is this better, or is the same?
That is perfect.
Good, good, good.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you.
Okay, so continuing with what you find in the platform is these 5 R's. And again, these are the components that constitute a system according to the parlance and the theories and everything in this social entrepreneurial world. So you will see when you enter the resources and the roles and relationships and the rules, they will all appear here. So you will have a screen that clearly shows, and it makes it easy to understand what is the system in which you're going to be part of, okay? So going to the next one. This I added to the presentation because when you look at a system and you start understanding the complexity, the magnitude, the difficulty of the system, then I don't know if it happens to you, but many times when I try to work towards change, I feel minuscule and I feel it's a kind of a lost cause. How am I going to affect change? And the best way that helps me is reminding of this tale of the starfish, the little girl on the beach where thousands of starfish are dying, and she goes and starts throwing one by one into the ocean. And someone, eventually an adult, it couldn't be a child, but an adult with our way of thinking, goes and asks the girl, "But what are you doing? You know, there's so many, you're not making a difference." And the girl answers, "Yes, but I'm making a difference to this one." So it's like when the report of jobless reports comes out. Oh, we have only 4% unemployment. That's great news. But if I am unemployed, I am 100% unemployed. I could care less it's 4% for the overall population. So there are ways to think about us being agents for change or improving the world, doing one little thing at a time. We can actually, working with others and so forth, in time, we can really be part of the solution. But do not get discouraged because of the complexity of what a system is. So now let's go and start looking at what changing that system is. And the word systemic obviously is very related to system, and change is change. So systemic change is how to change something that it is really pervasive. It's all over the place, it's huge, it's very complex, it's difficult to see. So that is why systemic change is such a big deal. And what happens is that what we normally see when we get frustrated or we have a passion to change the world because something makes us, crazy, that why this is like this and I'm going to dedicate my life to change it. Normally, that's because we see events, we see observable behaviors or something that has happened, and we tend to want to react to it, to do something about it. Now, and that is perfectly fine. As a matter of fact, you will see later many of the people trying to change the world, and they are part of the solution, are basically trying to tackle certain things that they recognize, and they try to address them. A little bit like the girl throwing the starfish to the sea. But if you go underneath the iceberg, you start to find basically the whys. Why, remember. So patterns of behavior, those are the trends. It's what has happened over time, are things that can still be seen, but are more difficult to immediately understand. But they are patterns. Like when you talk about, in today's world, like data, big data, or artificial intelligence, all of that is automated handling of big data, looking for patterns. And out of patterns, you come out with some conclusions and trying then to affect some change. So that's something that occurs under the water. But if we go deeper to that, and the deeper we go, the longer term is going to take to change, or more difficult it's going to be to change, is what they call the underlying systemic structure. Because now is, how do you change the structure of this system that are contributing to these problems? So imagine, in the case of the universe, imagine, we say, what? We need, we can't live with an asteroid coming to the Earth because it's going to, destroy us. Well, it's not so easy to change the rules of physics. Probably we cannot change them, or find ways to have the structure of the universe change in a way that that asteroid is never going to come. So these are very difficult things to do. So in a more realistic way of structural forces, well, anything that we see around us. Why is the government malfunctioning the way sometimes we feel it malfunctions? Why is it that the health system is so expensive and sometimes we don't feel we are getting treated like human beings? I mean, there's a lot of structural reasons behind that go beyond the industry, by the way. And then finally, the mental model. The mental model basically goes after the values of people, the way that we think. And I don't know if any of you moved from childhood and grew up in some other part of the world or the US, and then you happen to meet a classmate of yours that never left the place of origin, and you start having discussions. I can guarantee you that you will both see the world very differently. Your values are probably going to be different. Why? Because you have lived with an underlying environment that has certain mental models of how things are done, why they have to be done, etc. So the culture and values are the toughest things to change. So these are the things that describe, when you want to change a system, what you are going to be against. And what that actually, to me, tells me, well, before I tell you that, this is what you're going to see in the systemic change step. So all of the things in which, through your activities, through your existence, your organization's existence, you are going to include as to the things that should be added, removed, or changed. Not only for resources, but also roles, relationships, laws, etc., etc. So here on the right, you will now write how the system would look like after the changes. If you go back to one of the earlier screens, the system that you were describing is the system as it is today. This now becomes the system as, even if it's going to take you 20, 30 years, doesn't matter, is what you're working towards. Even if you are a piece of the, well, you're certainly going to be a tiny piece of the big number of people and organizations that are all working towards the same goal of making the system a better system. So then here, the last thing that you have is the rules and the results are going to appear. And this is the slide I wanted to share with you, which is from Ashoka. And let me just briefly say why Ashoka is important, because in the foundation of Bridge for Billions, the founders were very connected with Ashoka. And a lot of what they've learned and they valued in the Ashoka organization and frameworks have to do with social responsibility and impact change for better impacts and so forth. So this is an example of the fishing industry. I put there fishing industry, but it could be the system called maritime food production or maritime environment, something along those lines. So there are different levels here. If you remember the iceberg, we had things that were shorter term results, and then the more difficult structural changes and culture, societal changes, no? So here, an example is of direct service. Many of us, when we start probably our direct services, it's an NGO that provides a marine community with fishing rods. So here there was an organization that came to exist because they wanted to reduce the practice of fishermen, especially in not the industrialized communities, but the local communities, where they could now go to a way of fishing with a fishing rod that will not only continue to give them access to their livelihood, but not destroy and support the marine environment in which they live. So that could be one direct service example. Now, a scale direct service would be more of the same, but in a grander scale. In this case, a social enterprise that makes and sells low-cost fishing nets. So for this, I say, well, let's assume we know that plastic in the ocean and many of these things are problems. And we now came up with a new material and new way of weaving nets that are more sustainable for the environment. They are not going to trap fish and kill fish, blah, blah, blah. They're not going to have to be discarded the way that normally get discarded, et cetera, et cetera. So that could have a big impact in the industry, for example. System change is more like when you are now doing things that go beyond the direct service. Let's say that you've changed the structure of say a third world country, the US including, really. So a country or a region in which through the change of enacting new legislation and getting the communities perhaps to police not only themselves, but also the rest of the people that may have an impact on them, there is a way to change the structure of how that system behaves and promote a better environment and better results for their fishing livelihood and community. And finally, the framework change. And this actually, when it comes to fishing, I don't know for you in the East Coast or the Northeast at least, you may have seen Legal Seafood. It's a restaurant chain for obviously fish, although they serve everything, but they started with a unique concept. And this is many years ago, I'm talking about 40, 50 years ago, where all the seafood that they serve is obtained through good fishing practices. So that really, if you look at it, 40 years ago when they started, they were very small. And we all lived our lives. We never, 40 years ago, we were not thinking about the environment the same way we do today or the practices of fishing, but they did. And 40 years later, we all understand that whatever we eat, we should pay attention in how it was caught and how it was produced, because it has an impact on not just us, but the environment and many communities, et cetera, et cetera. So there you can see the many levels in which you, through your work and your organization, can find yourself inserting yourself in the overall system in where you can affect some change. It could be one of these, or it could be several pieces. And you're going to be part of a community in a way where many parts and many people are going to be working and will have to cooperate, unlike a traditional business in which you are competing against your competitors, because you have to prevail in order to gain market share and so forth. But here is slightly different. Here you really have the opportunity to work together with a lot of people towards the same long-term goal. So your impact, this is also part of step as we're going forward. So you will see on the left all of what your current system was and the system that you hope after the changes. Now, again, I want to emphasize those on the right do not need to be something that you're going to achieve in 2 years or immediately. You may never fully achieve all of this, but it is that high level, big challenge that you're really going to spend the rest of your time being part of the solution towards. But at least you have a clear vision, a clear understanding of what that is.
Gustavo, I have a question about this.
Yes.
So in the column of resources from the current system, it is the way they are now. And in the column of resources for the system after changes, everything could change, even though it may be pie in the sky.
Yes. Obviously, a pie in the sky is always relative. It's relative to time, because to do significant change on a system at a systematic level, every effort, no matter how big and well-funded it may be, any player, is a pie in the sky. From a business point of view that has some sort of social responsibility, take SpaceX. Obviously, SpaceX is a for-profit organization, but what Elon Musk is basically saying is the system after my change, after whenever, is that humans are going to be living in another planet. We're going to become a multi-planet, a planetary species. Okay, so that's the system after the change. Maybe Elon Musk will not be alive or us to see it, but that doesn't mean that's what they are working towards. They are not just doing SpaceX because they just like to design and shoot rockets up to space. They are doing it for very specific reasons, and in the way that they are organized as a business model, yes, they are making money. They become sustainable, they advance technologies, et cetera, but the overall principle of why they exist is to change the system of humans being a one planet species. So that's a huge change of a system. So it could be a pie in the sky. There may be many reasons why maybe it will never happen. I have no idea, but still, that's why they exist.
Okay, but specifically, the column on the right would say humans living on multiple planets.
Multiple planets. That's the system. Yes.
Yeah. That's a system after changes.
After change, correct. While the system today is humans living in one planet.
Yeah.
And the resources is all the resources that are today. Well, might be when it comes to aerospace, well, we send satellites to improve communication and look at the Earth and get a lot of data to improve agriculture and this and that, measure the impact of climate change, blah, 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 tons of things that the resources and the roles and players are doing today as a one planet species. But when you go to the other one, well, resources may be now different because today we don't have resources and infrastructure built and reliable enough to start exploring human exploration of the solar system even, or nearby planets. That doesn't exist. And we need resources specific for that. Among others, newer technologies, newer materials that perhaps today don't even exist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can imagine the complexity of what that would mean. Well, same here. You will have resources that are the ones today, but might be for the system that you're envisioning, there will be new resources that need to be developed that don't exist today. So that is why we are not, when we describe the system, we are not just describing the industry or the marketplace that we are going to be operating in. We are describing that because that's going to be our little contribution, but we are going or trying to identify the bigger system in which we are going to be, through our activity, contributing somehow, okay? And this will vary for different people. For example, someone that is more of a traditional industry and might be developing some hardware and selling products and stuff like that. Well, if the problem that they are resolving is doing some good to people because through the product, the quality of life of that individual or family or whatever improves, well, there is a social value into the business that they launched themselves to make money, to solve a problem because they are passionate about, say, the technology that they were able to develop or think about to solve a particular problem, that it's important for people and people are willing to pay money for it. That's the typical definition of a business. But in doing so, those communities or individuals become better off in certain ways. And that is a social impact for the better. But the reason why the person did this or launched this business was primarily to solve a problem and make money, but can now realize that in doing this, today's world, especially with the younger generations, is not just doing money, making money. You can have that as a primary goal, yes, as a primary driver, but people are going to more and more, including venture funds right now, also have a plus, so to speak, if that business has a social impact. So it's a corporate responsibility, social responsibility, that's CSR. So for those that are, those 10 individuals in this presentation that are purely financially driven traditional businesses, that's how you have to think, that there are things that are not primary objectives because financial growth is, but by improving things on others, your customers, your partners, your employees, the community in which you live, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you're doing more than just making money. And therefore, in the past, those activities that perhaps those industries were still doing, improving social things, were not incorporated into their strategies as an integral part. They were just as an aside. Oh yeah, we'll donate a little bit, here and there for charity or something like that, and that was it. That was in the old days. In today's world, they want to integrate what they do and constantly remind themselves that they're not just making money as the primary goal, but they can do more than just that. And as long as doing something like that is aligned with doing money and doesn't go against it, then it's an obligation to do so, rather than, forget, I'm not going to invest a single neuron of my time, when I can, through what the activity of the company is, I could really be impacting other things at the same time and without much more effort or any effort, extra effort at all. So here is where you will have the before and after system, and you will then be able to say, okay, given where I am involved, these are the things in which my participation in the change of the system is what I'm going to be about. And again, that system could be throwing one starfish at a time, or it could be having found a way to capture, 100 at a time of these starfish and throwing them to the water, or might be having found out some dynamics in the ocean currents that you were able to affect, or something about the system that now doesn't make the starfish end up on the beach. It all depends where you're playing the role, your role. So now that you have all of these things, and before we go to the step in which you enter that information for vision statements and mission statements. So vision statement is basically where in the very long term you aspire to get there, even if you're not going to get there. And the way that these vision statements get crafted have changed in time. In the old days, for a for-profit business, it was perfectly acceptable to say, our vision is to become the largest producer of XYZ, or our vision is to go IPO and become a unicorn company by such a time, or our vision statement is we have this technology and we are going to conquer the world. We're going to be the premier whatever product or service around the world. For example, I don't know if Coca-Cola in the 1800s, when they started, had this vision that eventually this beverage is going to be all over the world. I don't think so. But today, if you were starting a company in, say, like a Coca-Cola thing, maybe that could be your vision. Now, obviously, if you have more of a social impact, again, you can do the same thing. You can see your vision is to have created an organization whose impact into the changing towards this system, towards this goal, is significantly. We want to be, again, operating in different countries. We want to build an organization that's going to be a primary player dealing with governments and changing legislation and so forth. I mean, there are many things that you can envision. Here's where we want to be. Now, here's where you enter that information. And by the way, every time you use each step, remember to go to the parrot, see some examples, and go to the deep dive if you want to investigate a little bit, because you're still confused on the meaning of these terms, systems, systemic change, things like that. So now we go to the mission statement. Mission statement, in business, many times they say the vision is kind of strategy and the mission is the tactics. Okay, that has some connection, but not entirely. The mission statement really is what you or your organization will do and will achieve towards the vision. Okay, so if you're, let's say you're a nonprofit or you're a pure social entrepreneur, and you're going to be part of the solution towards changing a system to another future better system, these are the activities that we're going to do. These are the results that we are aiming for, et cetera, et cetera. So these questions are very relevant. Why do you exist? And this has a lot of parallels to the for-profit steps that we did or the modules that we did before. It says, what problem are you solving? Why do you exist? You know, how you can increase the breadth of your offer or the people that you reach, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the things where all apply to be able for you to describe your mission statement. Don't take it lightly, because vision and mission statements properly crafted are tough to do. The majority of people write vision statements and mission statements, and you read them, and it can be any company, and you just don't even know what they're saying. They all sound beautiful and, you know, heavy, important words, but at the end of the day, they are mush. So here's where you enter the mission. And now this slide doesn't appear like this in the tool, but this is part of, at the end of the day, just like with the industry in the module 1, your value proposition, you had to identify who had the problem. You had clearly understand that you could come with a solution to that problem, or you could provide that target group with a gain. Well, here you really have to be, because we're talking about social impacts now, usually social impact other than, well, social is right there. Social means humans, people, and things that are important to people. So if your business is to help the health of dogs, well, that's important because, you know, although they are not people, but they're part of society, and it's something that we have to, you know, do better as human beings. So this is where you, the very broad beneficiaries that you can have. And here's what you see in your tool, where as you're going to create a beneficiary, and you will list all the beneficiaries that you're going to be affecting, you will have your impact statement, vision statement, and mission statement appear under when you click on the arrow. So the system, the template is going to start building the whole impact plan in a way as we go along. So now, this is something that can help to give you some idea of which system are you going to be affecting. The United Nations, I think initially did this for the year 2000. They started to create things that were important for humanity to reach the year 2000 and take care of certain things. That was too soon. Year 2000 came and went. But out of that effort, this was created. And it's a framework, basically, of 17 systems or huge areas of sustainable development. So here, not only you have these 17, but you also have for each one, oops, I don't know what I did here. Are you still seeing the screen correctly?
Yep, we can still see it.
Okay, I'm just trying to get my, here we go. Oh, I know what happens here. There we go. So for each one of these, in this particular case, the health one, you have many different targets. It could be particular populations, like for example, target 3.2 is infancy. Okay, might be target 3.1 is neonatal, or things related to reproductive health, etc., etc. So you can use these existing frameworks to start thinking, okay, here's where I'm going to be acting could be one or more. And this is actually what you're going to see in the template, is that you're going to have a list of these different ones, and you click on one or more, because many times you will find that you are contributing or working towards more than one. And then within each one, in this case, I did industry, innovation, infrastructure, and affordable clean energy. You have these more specific areas, and then you click on them. If you click others, you will have to put, what you think it is. And basically that's how you reach a point in which you know the system that you're playing in or that you're going to affect change. You have your impact statement, mission statement, vision statement, mission statement, and you know the beneficiaries. So now we go into theory of change. Now, theory of change, when I first got exposed to the theory of change, it was in business. It was how to change a company that probably was faltering, and so sure, it was normally dealing with pure business matters, but within that you had people. So that kind of theory of change did not incorporate the social aspects. This now is really very much applied to social aspects, no? So it basically is the things that go into creating change. And it goes from obviously the goal, which is the impact. That's the final thing of, has that system changed? The inputs are resources, both physical as well as human, and they can be described like, for example, money amount, dollars, euros, whatever it is, number of people involved, et cetera, and things that describe that money and the number of people. For example, the input was 50,000 euros invested into this project. 5 people are working on it. Then the activities. These are the concrete things that the organization is doing. So that's where, as an example, is development and implementation of programs, building new infrastructures. And the specifics are the land that they bought, the school they designed and built. Now, outputs are really not the outcome. And this is a big difference between outputs and outcomes. The output is if you add 1 + 1 = 2. So the output is 2, but the outcome is the significance of that 2. Because I had 2 things, I saved the life of 2 people. Okay, but the output was 2. I had 2 safety vests or 2, I don't know, 2 things, 2 meals. And the outcome was people that had no food and were about to die, or didn't have medicines, they were about to die. The outcome is that their life was saved. Okay. And then obviously the impact is more intended towards the consequences of all of these and the outcome, as it refers to the very long-term impact on a system. So here's where the theory of change applies directly to you, and this is directly a screen from the from your platform. You have your planned work, and then your intended results. The inputs and the activities is basically what you're doing with your organization. In the case of an education and training center, you have teachers, the curriculum, so content is very important. You have the buildings, all the activities that go into providing the education, and the activities that the students also perform for their education, and so forth. Now, the output is number of students trained. Remember 1 + 1 = 2? Well, this is exactly, there were so many people that we got into our activities, and we trained or educated X number of students, or we built X number of schools that hopefully have been at full utilization. The outcomes are the benefits and the change. Students have increased social skills, okay? Or students get accepted now to college, or students got jobs, okay? And the outcomes can still be measured in a way, like the social skills. They are much more fluent in English, and they're better at communication, and those can be in a way measured. But then the final impact that you're having in improving the education of this population is that there is less unemployment. So as an education effort, you created better citizens that can earn their living through proper jobs, and that's your impact. So here's what you will see in the platform. When you chose the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, in this case, let's say I had chosen affordable clean energy and industry, and that's what's going to appear. And then for each one, you will enter the outcome. So in the case of education, my outcome was I improved the literacy of 90% of the population of the students, blah, 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 and so forth. So then we go into indicators, and indicators are very difficult many times in social matters because they are not easy to identify metrics, indicators that really are meaningful to what you want to quantify, which is your impact eventually. And it's also a balancing act, because if you may be identifying some indicators, but they are impossible actually to quantify or to actually go out and obtain meaningful data. So it's a balancing act that you will have to play a little bit with. So you will enter those things here. Now, there's tons of frameworks for impact measurement, and here you have the different ones. Each one, it's incredible. As I was going through some of these, and I found more that I had even not heard about. There's more than that we can bargain for. So don't get too concerned if you choose one. You'll figure out in time which framework actually is more useful to you given your circumstances. And then obviously you will have to manage that impact. And what does that mean? It means that the world is not fixed. With time, things change. So systems are continuously changing. You and your organization, as you grow, you're also going to be changing. So there's a lot of feedback that needs to be obtained so that you can confirm or reestablish your objectives or fine-tune your objectives. You will have to continuously understand the roles, the players, all of the people that participate in this system. And then you will have to measure those results, the impacts, via these indicators that you had selected. Then obviously you have to verify and evaluate the impact. What does that mean? It means that when you have an impact in these very complex things, you may or may not be achieving the impact, the positive impact that you thought. So by reevaluating, verifying and reevaluating, you may fine-tune things that will allow you to obtain meaningful benefits. And also, by the way, when we all do social entrepreneurship, we have one assumption. Remember in the first modules, validating assumptions? Well, here it also plays a role, because we have an assumption that what we are doing is going to improve the system and improve the outcome and have impact on the lives of people. But we may not realize that there may be unintended consequences of our success in a way. So we have to also get feedback and understand unintended consequences, because then we have to address those as well. And then the monitoring and presentation results, there's a whole plethora of help aids and consultants and articles. Why is that important for you? Because eventually you will need to report your impact in a meaningful way, that it is defensible, it's clear, and it's not easy to do. And what you measure may or may not be always the same things for the different public that you are presenting this. An investor or a VC with a social impact may have different type of criteria than, say, a charity or a grant, someone that you're applying for a grant from the government. So that's where the item 5 comes in. And there's a tons of information out there. Once you find that you have all of these things, and you have to continue improving by giving your presentation of the value that you have achieved in this social enterprise. So this is the final impact plan. You're going to see something like this. And the last slide is, these are the social development goals of the United Nations. So you may have had more than one, where you basically are going to see, not necessarily in this view, but in the platform, the outcomes, and then your key impact indicators and an impact measurement method that you have to always keep in mind, because if this impact measurement method is impractical, then there's no point in using that indicator. And I think that's about it. So if anybody has questions, I don't know, I went 15 minutes beyond, but I hope that I covered most of the questions. If we go back to one of the earlier slides when I started, I hope that now when you read these questions, you have a little better idea of what we are talking about in the context of social entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Gustavo. Does anyone have any questions? Everyone will be receiving the slides and also this recording after, in case you need to, revise anything or look back on anything specific. Donakai?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I can't get on camera right now, but no, I know we're going to be receiving the slides, but what happened is that when he was showing the one for the United, that he talked about for the United Way, the Sustainable Ways of Growth, on his computer, the closed caption and the thing is covering it, so I didn't know if when he sent the slides would it look the same. Okay, no, it won't. Okay, I see it now. So that, okay, that's all I wanted to just make sure of. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
and always remember that in the slides, sometimes where this information comes from, there is the URL, the link.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. It was covering the URL, and I wasn't sure if that was.
Okay, yeah. So, and if you don't find a URL, just go and Google, for example, Sustainable Development Goals, United Nations, or wordings for whatever slide or subject matter. There's a lot of things, but you can go first to the parrot and the deep dive for the different steps in the platform, and there is quite a bit of articles there that are can add information for you.
And just I wanted to say, where you have that Sustainable Development Goals, actually on my phone, I have a Samsung phone, right? And what I think that makes this so applicable is that when I plug my phone into charge, you have an option to charge. As long as you're charging, you're earning. It's not like a lot, but you're earning money as you're charging. And when you finish charging, you're able to give it to one of those sustainable development projects.
That's interesting. Well, that's someone created a business model, whether it's for profit or not, in which people can participate and some good money can be, brought into the sustainable goals. So yeah, there's tons of things that each one can do, whether it's through a business or even individually, so on so many areas to make hopefully a better world. There's one question and one hand raised.
Yes,
Hello?
hi. I just really quickly, I am, the system I chose was a healthcare and wellness. And I'm wondering if the system, if I should narrow it down at all, or if I should leave it like that, because I do want to create systemic change and impact in our healthcare system, with relationships among doctors and patients, with people realizing that they using complementary and alternative medicine can heal themselves, and really bring up self-healing and rely on the traditional medical system decreasing, so that people can have more money for their families, so that they can use tools that are inexpensive or at no cost to heal themselves.
Well, I think that it all depends. Like if you were to look at it from the traditional point of view of what we have been doing up to now, up to module 6, it would be very focused on your value proposition, on your target market. So that in itself is a subsystem. It's the industry in which you apply it. You're not changing, you're not describing that subsystem as I'm going to change the whole healthcare. However, that subsystem does play in the big world of healthcare. And the players in the healthcare, the rules and the relationships and so forth, is how the world works. And you have to have some sort of understanding of that dynamic if you want to be even more effective in your focused industry segment in which you're going to be operating. And also understand that any improvements that you do in what you're focusing on, how that does affect the healthcare system. As an example, there was a company I helped, I still help them occasionally, that are more in the healthcare revolution, you can say, of empowering the patient. Why? Because today you have remote healthcare, you have platforms and many services in which an individual that has a chronic illness, for example, can really do things daily for their own benefit and not just the interaction with the doctor. So there's tons of things of education, communication, support systems, and that improves the overall healthcare system. So hopefully, like what we're having right now, 10 years ago, we didn't have these kind of virtual conferences. Well, the system has changed. I don't know if it has happened to you, but certainly during COVID, I had my meetings with my PCP through Zoom. That didn't exist before. Did that help me entirely? Well, no, because you can't do on the screen everything that a physical examination does, but it did cover some other aspects that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do. So it's all the way that you understand the big system of healthcare and your business model of where you're fitting, where you're going to be participating in the big system, and hopefully that your outcomes are going to have an impact into the well-being of people at some level of healthcare. You're not going to change the whole thing, or you're not working towards changing the whole world directly, but indirectly you are part of the solution.
Okay.
And that's the part that I want you to remember, because if we forget that even if we have something, a for-profit business, and we don't pay attention to that, we can actually do something, not purposely sometimes, just through our business, but we are aware that by doing our business better, we are impacting, something on the system that we operate. In this case, I may be doing something through my business that improves outcomes for people's lives through better healthcare. But you didn't start as a for-profit business because you weren't saying, I'm going to make the well-being of humankind. No, you started because you had a very specific thing in the healthcare and you found a solution to help certain problems. Okay, that is good for you, for your business profits, but think a little bit beyond and realize that perhaps you're also not just a for-profit company, but also some corporate social responsibility. And
Definitely. Definitely. So for the